Darwin claimed to have found the missing link between monkeys and humans in Patagonia when he saw a primitive condition of the natives. When Darwin heard them speak, he surmised that their language consisted of a few grunts. In reality, it was more complex than English or Spanish. Here's a quote about the Fugan language from a Christian missionary named E. Lucas Bridges. The belief that the Fugans were cannibals was not only the mistake Charles Darwin made about them. Listening to their speech, he got the impression that they were repeating the same phrases over and over again, and therefore came to the conclusion that something like 100 words would come over the whole language. We who learn as children to speak Yangan know that within its own limitation it is definitely richer and more expressive than English or Spanish. My father, Yangan or Yamana English dictionary, to which I shall refer later, contains no fewer than 32,000 words and inflections, the number of which might have been greatly increased without departing from correct speech. Darwin, when he saw the poverty and filth of these people, Darwin considered that if he had not actually found the missing link for which he sought, these Fugans were not far removed from him. Yet they had many social customs that were strictly observed. And though lying and stealing were usual, to call a man a liar, thief, or murderer was deadly insult. Darwin knew that in the 5,000 years of recorded history, nobody had reported one species changes into another. So you hear that? Darwin knew that in 5,000 years of recorded history, nobody had reported one species changing into another. He grew up in a rural area near farms, and he must have known that mating a horse with a jackass produces a sterile mule, meaning the mule cannot have kids. So it happens when you mix, and the DNA is so different. Incredibly, there are over 1,000 unnatural history museums throughout the world based on myths of evolution, like the rotating earth fallacy. You hear that? Darwinism is a pathetic attempt to overthrow the book of Genesis. Evolutionists stole their millions of years from our 4,500-year-old Grand Canyon. Darwin also hated biblical and genetic injunction against close relatives marrying. It was illegality of King Henry's marriage to his dead brother's wife, Catherine of Aragon, that was the catalyst for the Blessed Reformation in England. Kissing cousins. Darwin the Druid also opened the door to pagan Druid cremation. Don't let British Secret Service agent Charles Darwin make a monkey out of you with his science fiction evolution. If Darwin was alive at the time of fellow agent Harry Houdini, he would have learned how to instantly change a monkey into a man and save himself a trip to Argentina. The Holy Bible says that the universe is about 6,000 years old and all the people alive today are descendants from Noah and his family. Well, there's a lot more to that, because what we understand of the Bible is just a little. So we don't understand the language, the time period, and the history of us and how they manipulated these certain aspects. So we have to understand that we don't really understand. Okay.
Neither the time nor the inclination to explain myself to a man who rises and sleeps under the blanket of the very freedom that I provide, and then questions the manner in which I provide it. I would rather you just said thank you and went on your way.
Otherwise, we're in a state of ignorance, which is the most foolish behavior a human being can participate in. And what are we in today? A state of ignorance. And people okay with that. I keep telling them, ignorance is not bliss. They don't care.
Nice to see you, Michael.
Good to be here, Gary.
This, I believe, calls into question Darwinian's theory of evolution. Is that correct?
Yes, Gary. Essentially, that theory says that human beings like us have been around for about 100,000 years, and before that you would have had only ape-man-like creatures, before that apes and monkeys. What we found, however, when we looked into the entire history of archaeology, my co-author and I did 8 years of research. We looked at every archaeological discovery that's ever been made, and what we found is that there are hundreds of such discoveries that indicate human beings like ourselves have been around for literally millions of years. We had to do 8 years of research, translate papers from German, Russian.
You referred to in India the Vedic literature?
Well, yes, I was saying in the beginning that we do take our inspiration from these ancient Sanskrit writings of India. They're collectively called the Vedas. Among them are the Puranas. Purana is a Sanskrit word. It means history. Now, these histories tell of human civilizations on this planet going back millions of years.
How do we know those are accurate?
Well, that was our question too. Richard Thompson and I, we thought, well, if there's any accuracy to those statements, there must be some factual evidence to back them up. Now, when we looked in the current textbooks, of course, we didn't find any such evidence, but we thought, well, let's look a little bit further. And as I said, that led to an 8-year research program where we investigated every archaeological discovery ever made. And what we found is that practically speaking, archaeologists and anthropologists have buried almost as much evidence as they've dug up. In other words,
Or perhaps overlooked, cast aside?
Well, yes, cast aside, and there have been some outright cases of suppression where people who have reported such things have had their careers ruined.
We should never, I don't think, be afraid to investigate opposing points of view.
Alright, so this is Smithsonian cover-ups. So they ain't lying, man. They've been covering up everything. I would like to share a few interesting stories that involve the cover-up of archaeological studies and the destruction of hiding of evidence by the Smithsonian. They are little-known stories that have been around for over 100 years. They do share one thing in common: huge history-changing finds with little evidence. Many times the little evidence that is recovered by archaeologists is lost or labeled as too extraordinary to be true. Source: the cover-up and alleged suppression of archaeological evidence began in late 1881 when John Wesley Powell. Now, we just came from that article that said that John Wesley Powell was a secret agent and that he was instrumental in hiding and making this belief system that we have today. All right. The geologist famous for exploring the Grand Canyon appointed Cyrus Thomas as the director of the Eastern Mound Division of the Smithsonian's Institution Bureau of Ethnology. When Thomas came to the Bureau of Ethnology, he was a pronounced believer in the existence of a race of mound builders, distinct from the American Indians. However, John Wesley Powell, the director of the Bureau of Ethnology, a very sympathetic man toward the American Indians, had lived with the peaceful Winnebago Indians of Wisconsin for many years as a youth, and felt that American Indians were unfairly thought of as primitive and savage. The Smithsonian began to see the American Indians are Assyrians, and they're cousins to the Europeans. So they've always had a soft spot for each other, but they always backstab each other. That's their way. All right. The Smithsonian began to promote the idea that Native Americans at the time being exterminated in the Indian Wars were descendants from the advanced civilizations and were worthy of the respect and protection. I want to let you guys in on something. Those Native Americans didn't build those pyramids. They didn't build those mounds. It was you. It was the Afro-Mexican, the Afro-Puerto Rican, the African-American with the full beard. I mean, there was all types of nations, but you gotta understand, most of them look like you and I, not like the Native American. That's to begin suppressing any archaeological evidence that lent credence to the school of thought known as diffusionism, a school which believes that throughout history there has been widespread dispersion of culture and civilization via contact by ships and major trade routes. We must understand that they always push isolationism, but by saying, "Oh, you just dealt with your little area," especially if you've been surrounded by water like Hawaii, then you must have just been in your area. Yet we were the ancient navigators. We used the clock in the sky to navigate. So the diffusionism is actually what happened, and not this bull isolationism. All right. The Smithsonian opted for the opposite school, known as isolationism. Isolationism holds that most civilizations are isolated from each other and that there have been little contact between them, especially those that are separated by bodies of water. In this intellectual war that started in the 1880s, it was held that even contact between the civilizations of Ohio. Now, Ohio is a big thing. Remember, we keep talking about Ohio. And Mississippi valleys were rare, and certainly these civilizations did not have any contact with such advanced cultures as the Mayas, Toltecs, Aztecs, or in Mexico and Central America. Why? They're so close. By old world standards, this is an extreme and even ridiculous idea. Considering that the river system reaches the Gulf of Mexico and that these civilizations were as close as the opposite shore of the Gulf, it was like saying that cultures in the Black Sea area could not have contact with the Mediterranean. When the contents of many ancient mounds and pyramids of the Midwest were examined, it was shown that the history of the Mississippi River Valley